Hey everyone, welcome in. It's Dom time again, Monday nights. So welcome to the Dom Giordano program. One of the things I know that we're all taking a look at as we head into the holiday season is debt, worrying about running up your own personal credit card. Maybe you have kids coming home from college. Maybe you have one of them living in your basement. And we're seeing more and more kids do this. We're seeing more and more ways that debt impacts those that are called millennials. They could be 18 to 32, 18 to 34. And what we're going to do tonight on the show is talk with two millennials who are people that are involved in the politics around this, the policy around this, to see what they think and to take your calls as we do every week at 866-472-8868 to talk about debt and how we deal with debt. And you'll see on our screen tonight the iconic, I love this symbol, I think it's one of the best out there, debt clock, which shows what's happening with the federal government, the debt that is on the head of each and every American and American families. As we speak during these 20 minutes, God knows the guesstimates of how much debt will pile up. Joining me to break this down tonight is someone who is one of the executive directors and founders of a new group that Can Kicks Back, and that is Ryan Shinecki. Ryan joins me here. In addition to that, we have Dan Fatton with us. Dan worked very hard in Pennsylvania for the election of President Obama, was a volunteer, and he works with New Jersey Future. Ryan, what's the title, The Can Kicks Back? Why that title? New group, just found it last week, had you guys on. What are you trying to do?
Right, well, the idea behind The Can Kicks Back is that politicians continually kick the can down the road. That can is my generation, the millennial generation, and so starting now we're fighting back. We're saying enough. We're saying that if we don't deal with this problem, it results in more debt, fewer jobs, higher taxes, and a lower standard of living for our generation.
And I'm a big blame guy. Who do you place the blame on? Tell us right here. Come on now.
Individual, well, I would say Congress as a whole. I mean, it's a problem that's
okay.
building up for years and years, decades. And
Not the baby boomers, not people like me, baby boomers and others. Are we part of the problem?
well, hopefully you're part of the solution.
All right, nice by you. And Dan Fatton, now Ryan is involved in the policy around this. You work for President Obama, who's had 4 years and is $4 trillion more in debt. But I think you might say there's some evidence that this is good spending, or this debt is good debt. Would that be fair?
I think that would be fair. You know, as a volunteer for the Obama campaign, I was heartened when I saw the election results, and I think that the millennials and young people overall really enthusiastically endorsed the president's agenda. And you know, he won young people by something like 70% of the popular vote. So when he took office, I think we were facing an economic crisis, unparalleled really since the Great Depression, and some of the fiscal steps that we took, including the Stimulus Act, were really necessary to turn around the economy. So some of that spending was definitely good. I think there's lots of research that's been done on the effectiveness of that stimulus, and you know, we had 30 straight months of job growth going into the election. So I would say that, yes, a lot of that was very good spending.
All right, we're going to put up on our board for viewers at home our first graphic tonight that shows the impact of some of this debt. And Ryan, I would ask you, I'm sure you have people that coalesce around, and you personally, what's the impact of this debt, the national debt, the student loan debt, on millennials, people that you talk with and see this as really a burden generation?
Right. Well, I think ultimately it comes back to the lower standard of living. You know, we, as a generation, were, as you said, facing student loan debt. The average is $26,000, but that's half of what your personal share of the national debt is, at around $52,000. And so, right now, what we're seeing is that Congress can't come to a solution around the debt. They continue to push things down the road, kick the can down the road, if you will.
So when you say lower standard of living, that means things like rent versus own. It may mean things like putting off marriage to a later date. It may mean not as many lattes. What's it mean?
Well, or uncertainty around jobs, you know, the inability to get a job, to make the salary that you need to make in the early stages of life that really help you raise a family or buy a home. So yeah, I mean, when you think about what is the American dream to you, all those things are in jeopardy because of our massive debt.
Well, now Dan is saying, though, that this is necessary debt. So maybe you can address that. Dan, tell him. I mean, you think this is necessary, even if in the short term this is hurting people of your age or both millennials. Why is it going to be beneficial?
Well, I would just say that I think we have a false crisis here. I think that we have an imaginary problem that's been dreamed up by the House Republicans in an effort to drive an agenda. So what people,
Wait a minute,
people my age are really concerned
viewers at
about.
home, that imaginary problem, this isn't some rabbit or whatever. We have that debt clock
Fair
out
enough.
there.
We can talk about the number, or we can talk about the percent of the gross domestic product, which I think is a better way to measure our national debt. But I think young people are really concerned about paying their student loans, and about getting a job, you're right, and about climate change, and about a host of other issues.
Wait a minute, how
and
did
the national
climate change
debt,
get in there?
And the national debt is a little misleading as a top priority issue.
You think they're not worried about it as a top priority issue to the average?
I do not think young people are that concerned
What
with
say
the
you?
national debt.
So I would tend to agree that it's not the thing people think about when they wake up in the morning. But let's just take climate change for instance, right? If you believe in climate change, which what do? We need to invest in that. We need to invest in research and development to develop these technologies so that we can store energy, right?
Right.
But that the government plays a big role in helping invest in those technologies. Now, if the debt continues to go up, we'll see higher taxes, we'll see less spending on these types of programs. So if you care about those things, I think you should be concerned about the debt. And I also think this idea of, if we want to talk about percentage of GDP, the debt's pretty much now at 100% of GDP, right? That's pretty high. But I think that's also misleading because when we start talking about trillions and percentages of GDP, people don't understand those numbers.
All right, let me bring you two guys back too, because you guys are really sharp in this, and people may not follow it quite as much. And I'll ask you first, the fiscal cliff, I think, is 40-odd days away, the so-called fiscal cliff, where all three of us are going to jump off together if Congress and the President can't come up with a solution. Concern for you?
It is not, and I would say that the fiscal cliff in and of itself is an oxymoron. This is a budget deadline that was built around congressional intransigence. So really what we're dealing with is a Congress who couldn't act, and now we have a budget deadline. When this happens in January, let's say they do nothing over the lame duck Congress, suddenly the government doesn't stop, the budget doesn't fall apart. It's a gradual slope. So we don't actually have a cliff.
Defense cuts and the Bush tax cuts expire on the middle class, so everybody's taxes will go up at that point.
Everybody's taxes will go up, but that's a paycheck to paycheck process. You're not going to suddenly owe the government thousands of dollars because a budget deadline passed. Your payroll tax will expire and your taxes may go up, but there's bipartisan support for extending the payroll tax cut. There's widespread agreement about the right way forward, and I think in this election we clearly saw that people thought we should raise taxes on the wealthy, we should let the Bush tax cuts expire.
Right. And let me ask you about that, because I'm going to challenge, and we'll bring Ryan back into that. Why not go with the system of the deductions, the loopholes, and all that type of stuff that brings in a lot more income? Why would the Obama supporters be more in favor, though, of soaking the rich or taxing the rich?
Well, I think look, the Romney campaign's argument about eliminating deductions was pretty fairly dismissed by the voting electorate, and most analyses of what you would actually save by getting rid of those deductions, the numbers didn't add up, which is why the American public rejected that argument. Okay, I'm going to give Ryan a chance when we come back. We'll have another segment here with you two guys, and we'll see if jumping off this fiscal cliff is a big deal or not. And I want to bring callers in, 866-472-8868, 866-472-8868 gets you to us. Are you worried about a fiscal cliff? Or do you say, shop now? The credit card, put it on the credit card. Don't worry about debt. Is it an issue with you? Is it an issue with millennials? 866-472-8868. Check out that debt clock that's clicking. Does it worry you? Or is it just a cheap trick here on the Dom Giordano program? 866-472-8868 gets you to me next here on Dom Time.